Welcome back to the final segment of the Commissioner's Corner. I still don't like that name.
County Connection.
I know, I like that much better, but Julie stole that for her weekly show. So, because she didn't like the Ovargo factor. That didn't fit her very well.
So we've been put in a corner.
That's correct. Yeah, and we are in the corner. So,
Let's go with another name. No.
So, County Manager Scott Vargo, your three commissioners, Karn, Dane, and Thomas, for those of you joining late. Hopefully you've got that auto rewind feature on your DVR and you can go back and watch from the beginning.
Right.
We have that available, I think, don't we, Brad? So, all right, so we want to talk a little bit of legislative update, just a few bills that we've talked about on some previous shows that have made a little bit of progress at the state level. And so, Thomas, you want to start with the wildfire bill?
So Wildfire has gotten through both the House and the Senate and is awaiting governor's signature now, right?
Yeah.
So, yay, success.
And this eliminates the posting of signs at every
Warning
county
signs.
border.
Sure. We're dealing with a fairly old piece of statute that
Like
was
100 years old.
And that's not a joke. Yeah, it's at least that old. That required us to post many signs in terms of any entrance into the county, and then what the fine that we could charge for an unintended campfire was only
Up to $50 max.
So anyway, this bill, assuming that the governor signs it into law, will eliminate the provision with regards to the signage and allow a fine of up to $750, right? $750 if somebody leaves a campfire unattended.
Yep.
And that campfire may be causing a fire that is costing us millions of dollars a day.
Right.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
So,
So that's a big improvement, big change there. So we're happy to see that one, making its way through the system. Speed limits.
Another bill is giving counties more flexibility in setting local speed limits. Really, instead of doing an exhaustive transit analysis study on looking at speed variations for a particular neighborhood, we would have more flexibility to, for example, move a speed limit from 35 miles per hour to 30 miles per hour. Really giving us the ability to help listen to those folks that live in that neighborhood. We have a lot of areas in Summit County and unincorporated that are really not rural. They're very much residential. And Dillon Valley, Peak 7 neighborhood, we have many different areas, Summit Cove, Farmers Corner. And so hopefully we'll get that through, and that's going to be before the Senate Transportation Committee actually tomorrow.
So that passed through the House?
Pass through the House.
Okay,
yeah.
great.
Yep.
All right, and then the third one we wanted to talk about was, and we mentioned aquatic nuisance species earlier, so Aquatic Nuisance Species Mussel-Free Act.
Yes, Mussel-Free Act. And this, we have talked about this before. It did pass through the House and the Senate, so it's in appropriations and it is providing some funding, so I think it will go to the governor's desk next. And it provides funding through a required aquatic nuisance species sticker on boats of $25. And so that will provide about half of the needed funding for the prevention and monitoring programs that we have in place, due to the fact that the federal government will not pay their share for their reservoirs. It has fallen upon us in the state to deal with this, and it really should be a federal responsibility. Nonetheless, it is common in other states, and there's also an out-of-state sticker that we didn't used to have, and the out-of-state, especially coming from these many states that are infected with mussels coming into our state, is really the biggest threat. So it's good news that it will provide about half the funding that's needed to do these prevention and monitoring inspections around the state, including in Green Mountain Reservoir. They have been done for many years very well at Dillon, because that's paid for by Denver Water. They're a responsible dam owner. Unlike what the reclamation has been doing. They just don't see it as their job until it's completely damaging all their hydro infrastructure, and then it can cost millions of dollars to deal with it. But they just haven't gotten that prevention in mind. So we'll fix them, won't we, Dan?
Exactly. We'll work on it.
So a big step in the right direction, though,
Yes.
to have some funding that's reliable at the state level, which has been a struggle between Colorado Parks and Wildlife, U.S. Forest Service, and then local entities being asked to pitch in to do some of these boat inspections and monitoring services. So.
And those, well, we know our national forests have been underfunded. Our district is funded about a third of what it was not that many years ago. And the same thing with Parks and Wildlife. They got a lot of this funding from severance tax money that has dried up.
Yep.
So it's a pretty dire situation to fund these needed services.
Yep. All right, so good steps on all three of those bills. Last thing we want to talk about today is Wildfire and the annual operating plan. So you guys will have the annual operating plan in front of you at your work session tomorrow, the 12th or 13th of March. And so that's the plan that lays out who's responsible for what, who does what, how do we share in costs, et cetera, in response when there's a wildfire within our community. And so you guys want to talk a little bit about that plan?
I'll kick it off maybe. I mean, Summit County right now looks like this, but before we know it, the snow will be melting and we will be in wildfire season. Yep. The seasons are much longer than they used to. It is common to have fires that can burn 500,000 acres or more, that can cost $2 million a day. And to have this AOP signed by us and all of our partners in the county, where there's a clear understanding before a fire occurs, who's on the hook for what and what resources are available, so that decisions are not made on the fly when we have a peak 2 type fire going on.
So a big shout out to Frank Selico in the attorney's office, right? Our law enforcement guys and our emergency manager for developing this plan. Our AOP has become a model document across the state in terms of the level of detail and the cooperation that we expect to see between our fire departments and law enforcement and police offices and just everybody, right? And so it was a very, very important document in terms of what happened last summer when the Peak 2 fire broke out, right? Yeah. And everything that document said was so vital in terms of us responding to that fire. So yeah, it's a big deal.
Yeah, and there's a big component of it that is an empowerment to the fire districts, to the sheriff, to the Forest Service, to the state to go ahead and hit a fire with the resources that are appropriate for that to try and knock it down quickly, rather than again, we got to call this guy, we got to talk to that guy, we got to make sure that it's okay with everybody. Just go knock the fire down. That's priority number one. And then again, there's a lot of other rules and expectations and steps that we follow once we get past that point.
Yeah, and it's not necessarily light reading.
No.
It's our packet for tomorrow is about 68 pages. There's multiple attachments as well that spell out agreements for aviation, that spell out agreements for hand crews, you name it. So very, very important, and that's our agreement with the feds. And in Summit County, we have 80% federal lands about, and so it's very, very important. We also have an agreement with our state partners too, but that's a different agreement called the used to be called the cooperative agreement, but it's a state and county agreement, and that kicks into place if a fire starts on private lands or state lands. But it's important that we get this stuff signed while it still looks like that.
Yeah, that's right. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Karn, anything to add?
Well, like Dan said, it's not light reading, and we have been the leaders in looking at a lot of these details. It really is important, but nonetheless, every year we have more amendments and more amendments.
Yeah.
Yeah, it changes. every so often. It was really important when again our emergency manager, our county attorney, were able to get the local fire districts to sign on to the agreement, which was somewhat unusual, if not unique to Summit County, to have all of those local fire providers actually signing the document along with the county and along with the state, et cetera. So that was a big step in the right direction.
Yeah.
And
Kudos
that's been
to
in
Red,
place
White,
now.
and Blue and Lake Dillon and Copper for all stepping up and agreeing to do that,
Yep.
right? That
Yep.
was that's huge.
Yep. All right. So that's all we've got for today, and we'll probably be back in April.
Probably.